Hello and happy Valentine's Day! Today's review is extra special because it's one that I never thought I would do. I didn't know if I should do it or if I could do it. And I know it's not Valentine's Day yet, but Valentine's Day falls between this review and the next review, and I did have something scheduled for this week. I wasn't able to get my hands on the audiobook, so I was like, what is something that will not take me very long, but I remember loving? Of course, fingers are always crossed when it's something I remember loving. And that brings us to Elfquest by Richard and Wendy Pini. I don't know how to say their names. I'm so sorry. This is a graphic novel, and that's why I was like, can I do a review on a graphic novel? Not very big, but this thing packs a punch. For all of you writers out there, I think, because I'm not a graphic novel kind of person, I loved Zelda and like video games, but outside of that, I was really steeped in the world of reality, and like geeky things like this just didn't appeal to me. But this really shows you the power of succinctness. Granted, they have pictures which can say far more, whereas a novel doesn't have pictures. But I'm gonna get into some backstory, okay? I first discovered Elfquest when I was like 10 or something, because my aunt, she's an artist, and she sent us this first installment. Initially, Elfquest, I believe, I mean, I'm no aficionado, but I think this is generally how it works. They are released in their own comic book, which you will see when you read this, or like the entire series, where it's like kind of chapter by chapter, but really what it is were the original comic books. Honestly though, I have no idea what the difference between a graphic novel and a comic book is. They're both graphic. But she sent us this, and the pictures did it for me. So if anything else, guys, this book is beautiful. It captured my attention and it never let go. I read this thing to pieces. But Beth, you say, this looks like it's in pristine condition. That's because it is. Because when I was in college, I decided I'm going to repurchase it. So I found this one, I believe, on eBay. And that is when I learned there's more. So to me, these four are the originals. However, because I know nothing about comic books and graphic novels, apparently there's even more. And they're not done. I just Googled it because I believe this one is late 70s, early 80s. And then this is the last that I went and purchased. And this was from like 2018. And this is The Final Quest. I'm an obsessive. So I learned, because there's always things that I didn't understand, things I thought were missing. Which, I mean, I guess that makes me a good writer and a good reader, because I realized like puzzle pieces are missing and I gotta figure out where they are. So yeah, I was like, I'm gonna buy the rest of the series, or at least what I could. And The Final Quest seemed to wrap it all up, but have I actually read The Final Quest, which has 4 installments? Absolutely not. For those of you who are like, oh my gosh, I remember this, where can I find it? First off, if you want to get the buttes, try eBay. But it's also available, like back when I bought that huge stack, it was available, I think on iBooks, whatever it's called these days. And it's available in 2 forms, black and white and color. Go with the color. Also, up to a certain point, I think like 2014, apparently all of these installments, like in their individual forms, are available for free on their website. So Google it if you kind of want more insight. But anyways, and that is the long saga. I'm forever grateful for my aunt for thinking that we'd like these things, because honestly, it never would have crossed my mind. So thank you, Aunt Cheryl, for opening my mind. As for Elfquest, this one is my absolute favorite, even though there's all these questions, because It is based off a group of elves. We have Cutter is our main character, and then he has a group of elves that he leads. He is their chief, and they live in a forest. The novel opens with this tale of how this like massive astral palace lands on this essentially human earth. The heavenly beings walk out, and it comes down to fear, because they come out and they come face to face with the humans that are living there. So they have this fear of the unknown, the humans have this fear of the unknowns, and the humans end up winning out, and they start to massacre the people that come out of this palace. Those who escape then turn into Cutter and his band of merry men, and to this day, they continue to war with the humans. They go from being like these tall, live beings to small, childlike creatures. I'll give you a little visual. So here, the palace is coming down, humans are scared. These are the high ones, as they're called, coming out. And I love the use of color and how we go from like the scared humans to this unworldliness that just the color palette gives us. If you can see, they're kind of thinner, a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more untouched, to something that's a little bit more savage. So we go from this to this, but they just evolve to something that's a little bit more savage. But they are all about the way, and the way is them living their elf life, not really caring about anything else, really about them as essentially a family. And then we transition into one of the elves being captured by humans, and he's going to be sacrificed. Cutter, so he's like, I'm gonna go rescue him, we're all gonna go rescue him, and in the meantime, they end up killing one of the humans, which is not something they tend to do. They play tricks on the humans, they might like scare the humans, but they don't actually harm the humans, whereas the humans are always coming after them. So in retaliation, the humans burn down what's called the Holt, which is their forest dwelling. Now, what do? They run to the trolls who live underground, and who they don't have the best relationship with, but it's tit for tat. We give you this, they give us this. They go down, and the trolls are like, what are you doing? You never come down here. Cutter's like, well, they burned down our Holt. The entire forest is gone, so we need refuge. Greymung, the king elf, was like, okay, we'll help you out. So he takes, I think it's Picknose is the troll that he chooses, and he's like, Picknose, take them down the tunnel of golden light to a place where they can now call home. Picknose is like, what? Are you serious? He's like, yes. What it ends up being is he leads them down a tunnel that dead ends into a desert. The elves have been living in a forest their entire lives. They have no idea what to do about this vast area that is hot and full of sand. Now they're stuck in this desert. They're like dropping like flies. Their wolves are dying, and they just don't know how they're going to continue on. And then they discover a village. They have no clue that any other elves exist until they get to this village, and they realize that it is full of their kin. And this village is called Sorrow's End. This is where we meet Lita, who is Cutter's soulmate. The thing about the elves is, if you can't tell by the pictures, it's a very kind of like sexualized book in many ways, where they're very busty and the men are very cut and there's very little clothing. Even though it's kind of a hedonistic lifestyle in a way, they have this ability to recognize one another. There's like a life mate where they choose to be together, but then there's recognition where it's like their souls recognize each other. It's very Twilight, but not nearly as cliche. Although there is one instance in a later book that gives me the ick every time. So they're up on this mountain and they see these people down below, and they're like, they have food, they have water, their lifestyle dictates we take what we want, we fight for what we want. So they go down and they rob this village, and Cutter sees Lita and he recognizes her. In like a split second, he says, I'm taking her with me too. She is fighting tooth and nail, but he takes her with him. Eventually, this guy named Rayek, who wants her for his own, this fella right here, he is like, well, I'm gonna go rescue her. He goes to rescue her, but he is defeated by the wolf pack because like, you just can't beat the wolf pack. They're the ultimate good guys. But what we do see is that he has this power to like transfix. He can control things with his mind. These are powers that kind of regarding the wolf pack, they have one guy who can, you know, work with trees and whatnot. He's a tree shaper. And then they did have somebody else who could be a healer, but they generally don't have these abilities that came from the high ones. But Lita is a healer. They work things out so that Cutter lets her go. But they're like, we left some of our own in the desert. So Lita's like, I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna heal them. We will bring them back here. Now, they're trying to integrate their two tribes, only for Rayek to still be so jealous of Cutter and Lita, but Lita is continuing to reject Cutter, but it's one of those like soul deep things where when you recognize whether you like it or not. I'm still unclear as to how recognition works. It's something that I'm figuring out in later novels. I don't know if recognition is one of those things where, hey, you recognize, you do the deed, which kind of seals the deal, and as soon as you do that, then you can move on, or if it's something where you are recognized for life and you will always leave a part of yourself with that person. And then part of recognition is like you have a soul name that nobody else knows or can know, which I don't remember if Lita has one, but Cutter definitely does, and his soul name is Tam. One of the next books, one of his tribe recognizes with another elf, and she has a soul name, but he doesn't seem to have one, but we'll get into that when and if I get to that book. Rayek comes to this point of jealousy where he throws down a challenge stick. It's a challenge of the head, heart, and the hand. Basically, they're fighting for Lita. Lita, when it's first thrown down, is like, I can't choose. Basically, she'd rather have Rayek, but she can't not choose Cutter because they've recognized. Their first challenge is a hand-to-hand combat. They're blindfolded. They're put on these two poles that are balanced on the ball. They have to keep their balance and knock the other guy off. Rayek, he's not a likable guy at all. He is pretty hot, but he's not likable, and he's really overconfident. And he's like, oh, I can beat this guy, like nobody can beat me. But then Cutter, who has been walking on tree limbs his entire life, is like, I mean, come on now, talk about balance. He ends up overpowering Rayek and wins the first one. The second challenge is they each have something of value taken from them and hidden in the caves. They are blindfolded and they are led into the caves, and whoever can find their item first and bring it back is the winner. Well, when the wolf pack had gone to the trolls, Cutter's BFF Skywise, let me get you a picture of him. This fella right here, he's all about stargazing. They're in the trolls' caverns, and there's basically a lodestone there. Fell from the sky. King Greymung is like, do not touch that. And Cutter's like, I can do whatever I want. So he chips off a piece, and it's basically polarized. This is what they believe is magic, and it's leading them where they need to go when in reality it's just like a compass. Skywise says, here, I want you to take my lucky charm, and this in conjunction with Cutter's heightened senses allows him to find his sword, which is New Moon, which was forged by a troll and is like super special. He inherited it from his dad. He's able to get it first, and then Rayek is like, I got this one in the bag, only for him to not have it in the bag. So the third challenge is overcoming your deepest, darkest fear. The Sun tribe has a great mother called Sava. Apparently Sava is sort of the heart and soul of this village. She's very, very old, which again, I'm not quite sure how long elves live. By this point, Lita has like 400 or 500 years on Cutter. And later on, we learn that they don't quite know how long they can live because they essentially live such a violent life that they die before their time. So like we don't know how long they can last. But he's only had one wolf friend, so I'm like, wolves don't live that long unless something way back in the sands of time helped elongate their brethren's lives too. But Sava is like, I don't know. If Lita is hundreds of years old, Sava's probably thousands of years old. And so she's not necessarily a direct descendant of the High One. She's not a High One. She's not like their first offspring, but she's a generation 2 under that. She magical mystery powers, and she's able to get into their heads and figure out what their greatest fear is. And essentially what Cutter has to do, like what he fears most is fear itself. In a way, he has to cross what is called a sky bridge. So it's just really, really high bridge that connects, one cliff to another, and he has to touch the sun on the other end and come back. And he's like, I can't do it. I cannot cross that bridge. I know I've been walking on tree limbs my entire life, but I've never done anything that. No, if I fall, I'm falling to my death. Like, I'm not doing this. Rayek, again, is like, I can do anything. Whatever he can do, I can do better. So he's showing off and he falls. Cutter, he's like, well, that guy needs help. I'm gonna save him. He ends up being able to cross the bridge and come back. Like, Rayek is too egotistical. What his fear is the outside, like things that he cannot control. And so the fact that Cutter has beat him and now Cutter gets Lita is just, he can't handle this. So he stomps off and he's like, well, you don't need me anymore, because he was their main hunter. But now that the Wolfriders are there, they have hunters. They don't need Rayek. So he's like, peace out. Cutter then is like, all right, Lita. She's like, I am not a prize to be won. Eventually, she has some sense talked into her that, hey, he might be really rough on the outside, but he's really good on the inside. And eventually, they do connect, and their recognition turns to love, which is why I'm saying I'm not quite sure the width, the breadth of recognition, because it's not like you recognize and that's your person forever. It's almost like you recognize and it can be your person forever, but it doesn't have to be your person forever. I'm also questioning, in order for elves to have children, can it only be born from recognition, or are they able to have children with their life mates? Now we have that, but what we also get is some background. One of the things that really helps turn a corner for Lita is she hears the story about how Cutter became their chief. He is the blood of 10 chiefs. His father's name was Bearclaw. His mother was Joyleaf. They had this great romance. They were super sexy, but Bearclaw was like a menace to society. If you want to talk about an elf that liked to cause trouble, then that would have been Bearclaw. If you want to talk about an elf with a temper, that would have been Bearclaw. One day, the elves go for a hunt, and they're like, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. And they can't quite figure out what it is, but then there's this presence. It turns out that there had been a spoiled patch of magic from the High Ones. Don't ask me how it lasted so long, or even how long ago this monster was created, but this monster bursts out of the darkness and it attacks the group, killing Joyleaf as well as some others. This beast is called Mad Coil, and he is the result of a long-toothed cat and a python who got into a tussle, tussled in this stagnant patch of magic, and they became Mad Claw. And so Mad Coil is a creature that can send, and that is another thing that the elves can do, which is basically speaking to each other mind to mind rather than verbalizing it, which is also something the Wolfriders can do, but the Sun folk cannot. I don't know if it's something they can teach other elves to do or what. Madcoil can hit them with this sending. After Joy Leaf's death, Bearclaw is like, no, like I'm not gonna let this creature run free. He decides that he's gonna go after Madcoil. Cutter's like, coming with you, Dad. And the dad's like, no, you're not. He's like, yes, I am. Bearclaw agrees to Cutter, but he tells everybody else they have to stay put. They find Madcoil's lair. They're like, watching. Eventually Cutter falls asleep and Bearclaw's like, that's what I've been waiting for. And he goes after Madcoil himself and is killed. Cutter, who he might be a barbarian of sorts, but he is the best of his mother and his father. What he got from his mother, mostly a level head and a sense of rationale. He realizes the only way to catch Madcoil is going to use his resources and use the people around him. So they are able to capture Madcoil and kill him. I really enjoyed it. And there was a lot that I thought this book did well in terms of gripping me emotionally. Like the bond that the Wolfriders have with their animals, or even just kind of the sheer amount of death that they tend to face. I don't know what it is about me lately. Maybe I'm just extra sensitive for some reason. But even them crossing the desert and the simple statement that some of their mounts didn't make it, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're bound to these wolves. They recognize the wolves as well in a certain respect. I really liked how there was like a lot of love and a lot of loss, but that's the end of Elfquest. Is essentially Cutter and Lita recognize, then you see that their relationship is gonna blossom into something else. The Wolfriders have seen that maybe they need to change their ways. Is there anything else I'm missing? Not really. It's definitely one of those books that can be like the beginning of a potential series, and then if the rest of the series is not picked up, can stand on its own, but at the same time you feel like you're left hanging, which is when we will get into book 2 if you want. Oh my gosh, sorry. If you want book 2. So there you go. I would love to know if you've ever read Elfquest, or if you are into graphic novels at all and what it is that draws you to them. The other kind of geeky thing that I used to do when I was younger, about the same period, was I would watch Sailor Moon. And Sailor Moon started out as graphic novels, or whatever you might call them. As I said, I don't really understand the difference between all of these illustrated books. But yeah, from what I understand, Sailor Moon, the TV series, is not the same as Sailor Moon of a graphic novel series. And then Sailor Moon, the American version, not the same as Sailor Moon, the Japanese version. There we go. And you might see book 2 tomorrow. Bye.